The following is a conversation with Belle Fraser, a beat reporter covering the Utah Hockey Club. In this video, we talk about how she started her journey into becoming a beat reporter and sports journalism. We talk about the day to day, what that entails for a beat reporter, and we talk about her experience with the Utah Hockey Club. I think if you're interested or someone you know is interested in becoming a beat reporter, this video would be a great resource into starting that journey. And as always, thank you for your support. I'll start the podcast with my little intro and then I'll get into the hard hitting questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Howlin for You. Today we have Belle Fraser joining me. You can follow her on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is up on the screen right now. She also uploads a podcast every week, every Tuesday. It gets uploaded on the Salt Lake Tribune YouTube channel. Belle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to start every interview with this question until they pick a name. So, are you team Mammoth or team Outlaw?
I voted for Mammoth. I just think it goes better with Utah's colors and the whole winter theme they have going, but honestly, I just want the fans to be happy. I don't, have a personal really big tie to either of them. I just thought I preferred Mammoth, but yeah, I'm not hardcore either way. I think it'll just be nice for the fans to have something to unite around and the team to, have a clear identity. So I'll go Mammoth, but I'll be fine if it's Outlaws.
Did you have any other names you liked? Yeti? I'm sure you loved Yeti.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us started thinking it was going to be Yeti, so you've convinced yourself that you like it. I don't hate Utah Hockey Club just because we've gotten used to it now, but I think it's important for the players and the fans to feel like they have something that represents them. So, if it's Mammoth, great. If it's Outlaw, great. I think it'll just be another exciting first after the season ends.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Stockholm syndrome or the uniqueness, but I like Hockey Club. Like if it stayed
Yeah,
that way,
right.
yeah, like it stands out amongst the league. So we'll start with the hard-hitting questions now. So how did you get into sports journalism? What was your education background, your inspiration to even get on this journey, and the first couple of gigs? What were they?
Yeah, so I guess sports background. I grew up in New York City, and I was a big Rangers fan. My dad grew up playing the game and was an Islanders fan, and he actually switched allegiances to Rangers, which I think is crazy. I could never leave my hometown team, but I was lucky he did because we went to a bunch of games growing up, and it's kind of something I loved doing with him, and it was fun. And then once I could read, I guess, I started reading the New York Post and the Daily News and once I got older, The Athletic and other sources, and I kind of figured out that you could combine passion for hockey and sports in the NHL with writing and journalism and make it into a career. So that was always the dream job. I watched MSG Networks, their pregame and postgame shows every night, and I always thought it would be the coolest thing being able to just talk about and write about hockey for a living, but obviously wasn't exactly sure how I was going to get there. I was on middle school and high school newspapers, and then I went to Boston University for college. And I went there because they have a great communications journalism program. And then they also have a D1 hockey team, which is nationally ranked, usually year in and year out, just a very historied program. So I was super excited when I got in there, joined the Daily Free Press, shout out student journalism, and they do a great job there. My first week on campus was in the sports section and then worked my way to the hockey beat, and I got to cover BU men's and women's ice hockey for 4 years, which was literally the best experience ever. It was so much fun. So many of those players go on to play professional hockey. So it was a really good crash course in kind of what I'm doing now, obviously at a higher level now, but it was great building relationships with the players, coaching staff, just kind of learning what it takes to have good coverage. And then professional experiences you asked, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
everything.
So I was writing for them, and then I had a couple internships. I worked for the New York Post one summer as a sports intern, which is really full circle for me because I grew up reading a lot of the people that I worked with that summer. So that was really cool. I got to cover a Rangers development camp, New York Jets, Mets, and then do a lot of the digital stories every day. So I learned so much there. And I also covered the Bruins for the hockey news in Boston my senior year, which again was another stepping stone for me, just being in an NHL locker room, talking to NHL players, talking to NHL coaches, figuring out what storylines work better for that audience. And yeah, and I wrote for New England Hockey Journal and some things on the side, just freelance. And then I graduated in May, had a short-term job, and then this came along. So it was very hard, as I feel most people can imagine, to turn this opportunity down. I moved out on like a 2 weeks notice, got here the day before training camp, and have been having the best time ever since. So that was long-winded. I hope I touched
That
on
was
everything you're wondering about. But yeah, that's kind of the steps I took to end up in Salt Lake City, and I'm, so grateful that it happened that way.
yeah, that was great. That's a lot to unpack. Did you and Keller cross paths? Because he was at BU,
He
correct?
was at we did not. So he was only there at the 2016 through 17 season. So I missed him. Trying to think of players like Macklin Celebrini, we got to cover last year. Lane Hudson was there and I was there. Trying to think Utah connections, but no, Keller wasn't there when I was there, but his Utah jersey is actually up at Agganis Arena. They have a wall of former Terriers that are in the NHL now, and Keller used to have the Arizona jersey up, obviously, but I was back there a couple weeks ago and they officially have the Utah jersey up. So I think that's just a cool piece of, Utah merchandise on the other side of the country representing the team's captain.
Yeah, it's crazy how quick they are. You said your dad switched from Rangers or Islanders to Rangers. Was that because of you or prior to you?
No, so he grew up in Connecticut, which is sometimes blurry. You're either like New England sports fans or New York, it seems like. So he was lucky. He got to see the Islanders win 4 Stanley Cups, and then he moved to Manhattan after he's in the Marine Corps, and I don't know what happened. He just he switched it up. So it was before me. So I've only ever known him as a Rangers fan, but we always kind of nag on him on that for losing his loyalty, but he'll quietly cheer for the Islanders sometimes.
Well, he sold high. Seems like he got out at the peak. Saw the four
Right,
cups.
right.
Like I'll see another franchise try to do it. So who was your favorite team? Was the Rangers? Do you have a favorite player?
Yeah, I had a couple favorite players. It's actually cool in the Minnesota Wild. We're in Utah last week. Matt Zuccarello is on that team now. He was one of our favorite Rangers growing up. We actually named our dog after him. Our dog's name was Zook. He sadly passed away a couple months ago, but it was funny seeing the real Zook in person. And so that was definitely a favorite. I think people have heard me say this, but ironically, Dominic Moore, who is now a huge part of the broadcast for Utah Hockey Club, he scored the game-winning goal to send the Rangers to the only Stanley Cup final I've ever seen them in. So he definitely stands out. I mean, that whole team, Derek Stepan, Brian Boyle, a lot of these guys are kind of in the media industry now, which is funny. But I would say the entire 2013-14 team is kind of what I grew up with and is the Rangers team I kind of look back on as what really got me to fall in love with the sport.
So surreal that is part of the Utah Hockey Club now.
Yeah, right.
Did you know prior to accepting the job he was part of
I
it?
didn't. They announced it, I think like a week after I accepted with the Tribune, and my dad sent it to me and he was like, "There's no way." I was like,
Yeah, that's
crazy."
so it seemed like the preparation time for you moving to Salt Lake was like a break next, just like everything else with the team, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of fit in with what the players and the rest of the organization were going through. It felt like most of the people involved, media side and organizationally, were new to the state, new to the city. So it honestly worked out well. And then the other beat writers, and Ryan, have been here for a while. They're from Utah, and Brogan moved over. So it was nice having a mix of people who could give you recommendations and kind of show you around, and then also have the comfort that a lot of the other people around you were just figuring it out as well. So no complaints, and it was kind of nice to hit the ground running.
Yeah, that is such a unique situation for everyone. So I want to get more into like the day to day of a beat reporter. You call
Yeah.
yourself a beat reporter?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what are the similarities and differences between like game day and practice day for a beat reporter?
Yeah, so I can start with game day if you want. So game days, there's morning skates every game day unless it's an afternoon game or a back-to-back. So say 80 to 90% of the game days have a morning skate, and those happen at Delta Center when it's in Utah. So that'll usually be around 10:30 a.m. and you'll go, it's an empty arena, which is pretty cool. I kind of love sitting in the lower bowl when it's just the reporters there. It's kind of surreal. And then you see it 8 hours later and it's filled with thousands of people. But that's usually takes only 20 minutes. The guys aren't on the ice for that long because obviously they're playing that night, but you get the lines, you see if anyone's not skating, if that indicates injury. You kind of just get roster decisions, and the first goaltender off at morning skate usually starts the game. So you're kind of just collecting information for that night, and then you'll go downstairs and they open the locker room, and that's when you get to talk to the players. And morning skates and practices are a lot more informal when it comes to interviews, which is helpful for us because all the players are just sitting there and you kind of can walk up to anyone and talk to them, whereas post game it's a little more structured. There are official scrums and you have to request players. So that's when you're going around if there's a player who played for the team that they're facing that night or is coming up on a milestone or is on a new line. That's another just information gathering time. And then we go talk to coach, and a lot of that press conference, again, is just asking about the lineup, who's in, who's hurt, mindset for the game. And then sometimes you just use those to get quotes for other longer stories you're working on as well. So that whole process, I say, would take an hour, hour and a half, and then the opposing team also skates at Delta Center after that. So sometimes we'll stay, talk to that team, talk to their coaches, just to see how they're thinking of the game. Then you go home. I usually write, I just work on other stories, other projects during the day, and then you get back to Delta Center around an hour-ish before the game. I like to do that. And yeah, you cover warm-ups, you get the lines again, any updates, tweet out the game, write your recap afterwards, you go to the locker room again, talk to coach again, and then you stay at Delta Center for as long as it takes to get your your story in. So that's kind of a game day. Their days are long, but they're really fun and doesn't really feel like work at all. And then practice days, you asked?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, practice days, they practice at the Olympic Oval, as I'm sure everyone knows. So those practices are usually a bit longer. Today was 45-ish minutes. It really depends on their schedule, if they're trying to rest players or they really need to have, full conditioning in a practice. So we'll go to the oval, we'll observe the same things that we do at morning skate, and then it's an open locker room again, talk to coach again. So it's kind of similar to morning skate, except they're doing more drills. And that's kind of when you collect story quotes and information for feature stories or more evergreen stories. It's less about games and you're kind of more focusing on the bigger picture. And again, it's just so much news gathering too, especially at the trade deadline and injuries and contract extensions and things of that nature. So, yeah, it's kind of the same mission every day, different place, different parameters, but that's kind of an overview.
Very thorough answers. Do you travel with the team as well?
Yeah, so I travel to around 70%, I feel like, of the road games, which is super fun. Just getting to see different parts of the country that I probably wouldn't if it wasn't for the job. And the same schedule goes there. It's just at a different arena. And yeah, it's basically the same thing.
Do you stay at the same hotels as the players?
No, so we travel separately as the Tribune. So I'm on different flights, different hotels, I assume,
Okay.
different hotels, an NHL versus a newspaper budget. But
Yeah, yeah.
you kind of just follow alongside them and you're there when they're skating and they're playing and they're practicing.
Is there a player, your favorite player to interview, or does someone, stand out, give you more extra time, or doesn't sound as media trained, gives you some pretty honest answers? Does anyone jump out the page to you?
It's funny, we were all just talking about selfishly how happy we were that Sean Dursey was back because he's a quote machine. He came in and talked for like 10, 15 minutes when it was his first day back in Utah after he played in LA. And he's so passionate and enthusiastic about his role on the team and about the team's success that, and feels like he just likes to talk and he wants to get the message across. And he's very honest. So Sean Dursey, I definitely would say, is up there. Dylan Gunther is just a funny quote I'm sure you've seen and a lot of the fans have seen. He is really just like a 21-year-old kid that loves playing hockey. So he says it as it is. Let's see. Mikhail Sergachev, I would say, is the most thoughtful quote on the team for sure. He might seem a little reserved in interviews, but he really tells you how he feels and he'll go in depth about things and he won't give you a cookie cutter answer. Same with Alex Kerfoot. I mean, no one's bad at interviews at all, but I think those are a few that stick out where if you need, a thorough explanation or quote for a story, you might go to those guys.
And I'm sure Coach Bear does a great job as well.
Yep, he always has a standout sentence from every press conference, it feels like.
So I want to ask, is it hard to balance the objectivity with the emotions covering the hockey team? Like even like big overtime goals or a huge win like Vancouver last week, is it hard to remain that journalistic objectivity, or do you find yourself getting up in the emotions as well?
I think the way that I view it is it helps that it's not a team that I grew up rooting for. I think that's when it would be hard, but it's really not for me. I think you're kind of rooting for a good storyline, as terrible as that may seem. If you have a whole recap written and then the other team comes back and scores two goals, you kind of have to start over. So in that way, you're probably in the back of your mind hoping Utah pulls off the win in the third period. Um, and I think it's really important to say objective in your work, just to give fans and the audience just the truth and not kind of have it tainted by emotion or opinion. And I think columns are important, but I try to keep my general work pretty level-headed. But I also think part of this job, it's really important to appreciate the moments you get to witness. Like you mentioned, that Vancouver overtime goal. I'm obviously not cheering or whatever, but I think it's really cool to see games like that and be in the building and realize kind of the privilege you have to cover this team. So I wouldn't say it's nerves or excitement as a fan. It's more of, a deep gratitude that you get to be in that moment with everyone.
Yeah, and I also came across a post. I don't know if this is true, but in general, is cheering allowed on press row or is it not
No.
allowed?
A big no.
Can you explain that? Like I've never heard that before. I didn't even know if it was true or not.
Yeah, I mean, journalists and press are supposed to be unbiased. They're not supposed to be cheerleaders for the team, kind of there to give you the information and the storylines, and then fans kind of get to pick up, the excitement and that type of thing. So, no, it is not allowed. I mean, if someone cheers, it's not like they're going to get kicked out, but it's kind of just a understood rule, that you keep it professional.
So are you still a Rangers fan and do you keep tie? Like they had a lot of drama this season. It seemed like uh, coincidentally they both traded with each other, but Vancouver and New York Rangers seem to have so much
Yeah.
drama this season.
I know it's funny. I'm definitely less in touch than I have been in the past just because I've watched and covered every single Utah game and obviously those overlap. So it's been kind of nice not having to put my whole heart and soul in a team that feels like it's collapsing right now. But yeah, I think you just stay alert with NHL news around the league. And if the game's on, I'll obviously catch it. And it's fun when Utah and the Rangers play. But unfortunately, I'm not as invested as I was growing up just because of the nature of the job, but um, if that's the sacrifice it takes, that is a easy easy price to pay.
For sure. Do you have a favorite road city yet?
Columbus, Ohio, actually. The beat writers they've heard me talk about it when I got back, but I'd never been to Columbus or Ohio in general, and I didn't really know what to expect, but I loved the city. And the great thing about being on the road is between morning skate and the game, if you're not writing, you kind of have 3 to 4 hours to explore, go to a restaurant, get a coffee. So I had time to explore the city, which was really cute, a lot of shops, a lot of places to eat, and the downtown by the arena is really nice and built out. And I also just loved the arena. And I'm quietly rooting for them to make it into the wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. So I think that was a city maybe I wasn't expecting to love as much as I did, but definitely a standout. And then in St. Louis, I had some of the best barbecue I've ever had. So I think that has to be at the top of the list as well. But yeah, those two are two places I hadn't been before and have really loved on the road.
Definitely the Blue Jackets, it's a feel-good story, so it'd be
Yeah.
great for them to make playoffs. I have this very odd question, and I have no idea how to phrase it, but is there like formal training or education for how to use Twitter as a beat writer? Like, are you actually told like we need to tweet in game every power play, every penalty kill at the end of every period, give a blurb, or is it at like a an unspoken tactic that beat writers have grown to realize that they should do?
Yeah, that's a really good question because when you were talking about it, I was trying to think back when I started doing Twitter. I feel like I had a journalism class in high school, sports journalism class, and they were like, download Twitter because this is what journalists use. And then I just automatically started following all of my favorite beat writers around the league. And I think I saw what they did and caught on to what the patterns were for covering a hockey game. And then at BU, I got trained when I was on the hockey beat. There was an account, it's the Boston Hockey Blog that covers the team. So you're trained on how to tweet out those games, which was super helpful for me because I still use what I learned there. So it's like goals, penalties, blurbs, that type of thing. So it really goes back to, yeah, my experience with the college newspaper where I feel like you learned some of the intangibles there. And then, yeah, it's just picking up, I think, on what you see around, what information fans want to, and you kind of mold your content into what people want to know during games. So, yeah, that's funny. I've never actually thought about that, but I think it was just like an evolution of it and now it's a really great way to connect with all the fans in the community and something I enjoy doing.
Yeah, I think it's like human passing down sort of philosophy or culture. That's what a meme used to be, but now the word meme lost all
Right.
meaning. Yeah. So you're at the Four Nations as well, is that right?
Yeah, I was in Boston that week just for the break and then the Four Nations was there, so I was like, let's definitely try to cover it and it worked out well.
So that was all coincidental that you were in Boston at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I moved from Boston to Utah, so when there's a break in the schedule, I usually go home. I've gone back a couple times this season, and then yeah, they announced that the last three games were going to be at TD Garden, so I immediately applied for a credential. That was before the rosters were announced, but I think we had an inkling that someone from Utah would be on one of the four teams, which turned out to be true. So it was great. I got to talk to Oli Mata after the Finland game and kind of do a feature on him and what he meant to that team, what he's meant to Utah. Unfortunately, Yusuf Alamaki was a healthy scratch for both games, and then no one on any other teams. But it was really cool to just be there, and I wrote kind of a feature story on what it meant to new Utah Hockey Club fans to see the best of the best in the NHL, and it kind of got them excited for what this team could be. So yeah, a once in a lifetime opportunity. I was kind of pinching myself when I was there for the final. Another thing that it's hard to believe that you get put in those positions. But yeah, very cool and something I'll definitely remember forever.
Would that be your most memorable moment so far in this season, or is there another moment personally that jumps out at you?
I don't, it's definitely up there. Um, there's so many. I think honestly, it's just like the random nights at Delta Center when you get to talk to fans or readers and you feel good about your story and you kind of feel in your groove and you're like, I'm really doing it and this is really fun. And I think it's little moments like that. And then obviously going back to Madison Square Garden the first week of the season when they played the Rangers, that was pretty full circle for me. Um, we talked about the Vancouver game in overtime, but I think that was just a really fun game to cover. And you kind of saw the Delta Center explode in a way that it hasn't a lot this season. So those are just a few. But yeah, I think Four Nations just NHL wise is up there, but there's been little special Utah moments, I think, throughout the season.
And we're a couple days from the trade deadline. How would a trade break for you? Are you like all of us refreshing Twitter, or do you have an inside scoop? Someone messages you before it's public?
It's funny, we've all been saying like our phones are strapped to us 24/7 right now because we're scared to miss an alert. But usually when the team trades someone, calls someone up, we get a text or an email with a press release, kind of the details of it, and then we're able to write about that, forward it out. There'll usually be a scheduled press conference that follows, like with Ole Mata and Bill Armstrong, they talk today. So we get a heads up from the organization and that's when they get to choose when they want to make it public. But I would say I've definitely have post notifications on for all of the big insiders like Elliot Friedman, Frank Saravalli, because they have contacts with agents, and if they hear something brewing about Utah, then you can hop on that and prepare to write a story or talk to some of your sources before the team announces it. So it's kind of a mix of waiting for the heads up from the team when they make it public and also just keeping tabs on all news sources throughout the week. So, kind of a circus of where you get your information from, but they make it, pretty easy and accessible for us.
Yeah, that's good. So you answered all my questions. So very thorough. I love all these answers. So thank you so much for joining and
Yeah.
answering. I gotta re-listen to this whole video and watch my own video probably for the first time ever. But just wonderful, great answers, and thank you so much for coming on again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.